I wasn't snooping. I swear. But that's how these things start, don't they? One night you're sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through the news or checking the weather, and suddenly, your gut tells you something's off. That's exactly what happened to me. I didn't even notice the subtle changes at first. How she started staying late at work more often, or how she seemed distant, detached. I chalked it up to stress. Work had been rough for both of us lately, and the distance between us was just life happening. Nothing major. At least, that's what I told myself. But when she left her phone on the kitchen counter one evening, buzzing every few minutes with notifications, curiosity got the better of me. I didn't go through it immediately. I stared at it, hesitating, telling myself it was none of my business. Yet, something pushed me over the edge. I unlocked it with the password I'd known for years. That's when I saw it. A string of messages from numbers I didn't recognize, conversations I could barely wrap my head around. I felt like I was falling through a black hole. There it was, my wife, the woman I'd been married to for over a decade, selling herself for a night. Hotels, arranged times, fake names, and fake smiles, all written out in plain, cold text. It wasn't just an affair. She was a business transaction. I didn't know whether to vomit or scream, but I didn't do either. I sat there, frozen, letting the shock sink into my bones. That night was the longest of my life. She was in bed, sound asleep, while I sat in the dark living room, replaying every conversation, every hug, every kiss, and every night we spent together. What was real? What wasn't? I felt like I didn't know her at all. The memories didn't make sense anymore, like they were all tainted with this dark, filthy secret. I wanted to confront her right then and there, wake her up and demand answers. But something held me back. What if she lied? What if she denied it and turned the tables on me, making me feel crazy for even suspecting something like this? No, I couldn't let her see me hurt. I had to get smart about it, think it through. And that's when the idea came. It was dark, twisted, and felt wrong in every way, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know for sure. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called one of the numbers I found in her messages. My heart pounded in my chest as the phone rang, and when a man answered, I fumbled my words, trying to sound calm, professional even. "I heard you provide certain services," I said, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. The man on the other end didn't ask questions. He just gave me instructions, told me how to make a request, and who to talk to. It was disturbingly easy. Too easy. Within minutes, I had set up a meeting, a booking for someone I knew too well. My wife. I felt sick. What the hell was I doing? But I couldn't stop now. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know the truth. The waiting was unbearable. Every second felt like it stretched out into an eternity, but I kept up the act. She didn't suspect a thing. She even kissed me goodbye before heading out for a work dinner. The night came, and I drove to the hotel, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I checked in under a false name, just as I was instructed, and waited in the room. The room was just like every other hotel room. Generic, clean, lifeless. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, my heart beating louder than I'd ever heard it. What was I going to do when she walked in? What was I even hoping to find? And then, there was a knock at the door. I hesitated for a second, almost too scared to move, but I forced myself to get up. I opened the door slowly, and there she was. My wife, standing in front of me in a tight black dress, looking as beautiful as ever, but there was something different in her eyes. She didn't recognize me. How could she? I was just another faceless man to her, a client. "Good evening," she said softly, stepping into the room, her voice practiced and smooth, not at all like the woman I thought I knew. She looked at me, her eyes scanning me briefly as if I were just another transaction, another man to please. I swallowed hard, trying to keep it together. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But it was. She didn't flinch. She didn't waver. My wife was selling herself to me. Not even knowing it was me, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I felt the rage bubbling up, the betrayal slicing through my chest like a knife. "Is this what you've been doing?" I asked, my voice low, but it carried the weight of my breaking heart. She froze, her face paling as recognition set in. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw panic flicker across her expression. "John," she whispered, her voice trembling. She took a step back, her body stiff with fear. I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides, the pain and fury twisting inside me like a tornado. "Yeah, it's me, your husband. You gonna tell me what the hell's going on? Or are you going to pretend like this is some kind of mistake?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, and for a split second, I saw the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew. But that didn't last long. I can explain," she stammered, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. "It's not what you think, John." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give when everything is crumbling around you, and there's nothing left but the bitter taste of irony. "Not what I think. I just pretended to be one of your clients, and you didn't even recognize me. I think I know exactly what's going on." Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to explain, but the more she talked, the more everything fell apart. She talked about money, about desperation, about feeling trapped in her own life. But none of it made sense. We weren't struggling that badly. We had problems, sure, but who doesn't? This was something else. Something darker. "You think this is gonna fix things?" I spat, pacing the room. How long? How long have you been doing this?" She didn't answer right away, and that silence was all the answer I needed. "John, I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was never about you. That's when I lost it. Not about me? You think that makes it better? You think that justifies this?" I could feel my voice rising, my chest tightening with every word. She broke down then, collapsing onto the edge of the bed, sobbing into her hands. But I couldn't feel anything for her in that moment. All I felt was emptiness. We left the hotel separately. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. I didn't know what to do, what to say. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with had shattered every piece of trust one had in her. How do you come back from that? When I got home, the house felt different, like it wasn't even mine anymore. Every room was haunted by her lies. I didn't sleep that night, and when she came home the next morning, we didn't talk. She just packed a bag and left without saying a word. But the silence wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of the storm. The house was quiet after she left. Too quiet. I never knew silence could be so loud. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint hum from the refrigerator felt like a reminder that something was missing, that my life had been gutted. The longer I sat there, the heavier the silence became. I couldn't escape it. I thought about calling someone, my brother, a friend, but I didn't want to explain. How do you even begin to tell someone that your wife was selling herself in hotels? That she's been lying to you for who knows how long? The humiliation burned inside me like acid, and the shame twisted around my gut like a snake. Instead, I just sat there. 4 hours. Days, even. Work didn't matter. Food didn't matter. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. It was worse than that. I felt hollow, like a piece of me had been carved out and thrown away. And the questions, God, the questions were relentless. Why? How long? What was I not giving her that she needed to find elsewhere? She called me a few days after she left. I wasn't expecting it, though I guess I should have. She didn't sound like herself on the phone. Her voice was small, cautious. She was testing the waters, unsure of how I'd respond. "John," she said softly, her voice cracking slightly. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence hang between us. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling. I wanted her to sit in the emptiness she created. But eventually, I gave in. "About what?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. I want to explain," she stammered. "I know I hurt you, but please, just give me a chance to make you understand." I didn't know if I wanted to understand. I didn't know if I could. But I couldn't just hang up on her either. No matter how much I hated what she did, part of me still wanted answers. Part of me still wanted her. "Fine," I muttered. "Come over." When she showed up, it was like seeing a ghost. She looked worn, tired, like the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. But even then, she was beautiful in that heartbreaking way. like someone you loved but didn't recognize anymore. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table we'd shared meals at for years, and she began to talk. At first, it was the usual apologies, the kind you expect when someone gets caught. But then she started to unravel, and the truth, the real truth, came pouring out. It started about a year ago, she said, not able to look me in the eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just one night, one stupid night. A mistake. But then, she trailed off, her hands shaking as she gripped her coffee cup. I waited, feeling like my whole life was balanced on the edge of her next words. But then I needed more money, she continued, her voice barely audible. I thought I could control it, that it was just something temporary. But it became easy. I don't know how to explain it. I felt powerful, in control in a way I hadn't felt in years. I could feel my blood boiling again, but I kept my mouth shut. I needed her to finish. I needed to hear every dirty detail. I didn't know how to stop, she whispered. It wasn't about you, John. It was never about you. I swear to God I love you. But I lost myself somewhere along the way. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was sit there, stunned by the weight of her words. It was one thing to find out about her betrayal, but to hear that she was using those moments to feel something she said she couldn't get from me, that was a whole different kind of pain. Do you love me? I asked, my voice raw and shaky. She looked up at me then, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Yes, she said without hesitation. More than anything, John. I swear. This wasn't love. It was never about love. It was something else. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the need for me to believe her. But I didn't know if I could. How do you believe someone after something like this? How do you trust that the person who shattered your world still holds any piece of your heart? I stood up, pacing the room as I tried to make sense of it all. Then why, Kate? If you love me, why the hell would you do this? She flinched at the anger in my voice, but I didn't care anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them to make sense. I don't know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I was lost. I don't know. I felt empty, like nothing mattered anymore. I wasn't thinking straight, John. I wasn't thinking about us. Her words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, suffocating everything in its path. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she still loved me, that we could somehow find a way through this. But how? How do you move on from something like this? I don't know if I can do this, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. She broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably, but it didn't move me. I felt numb, completely numb. Her tears didn't change what she'd done. They didn't erase the betrayal, the lies, or the nights she spent with strangers while I was home, none the wiser. I'm sorry, she kept repeating, over and over again, like a broken record. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't fix the mess we were in. For days, I wrestled with what to do. I couldn't just forgive her and move on like nothing happened. But the thought of letting her go, of ending everything we built over the years, felt like another betrayal. It was a lose-lose situation, and no matter which path I took, I knew I'd never come out of it whole. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smile, her laugh, the way she used to look at me when we first fell in love. And then, like a knife in my chest, I'd remember what she did. She called a few times, but I couldn't talk to her. Not yet. I needed space. I needed to figure out what the hell I wanted. Eventually, I agreed to meet with her again. She wanted to talk, to figure out what came next. I wasn't sure what I wanted to hear, but I knew we couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. We met at a park, a neutral place where we could speak freely without the weight of our home bearing down on us. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and for the first time, I realized she was as broken as I was. Maybe even more. What do you want me to say, John? She asked, her voice barely holding together. What can I do to fix this? I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't know if there was anything left to fix. I don't know, I said, staring at the ground. I don't know if there's any way to come back from this. In the end, we both knew what had to happen. There was no going back. Too much had been broken. Too much had been lost. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, neither of us willing to say the words, but both of us knowing it was over. "I'm sorry," she whispered one last time, but this time, I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I stood up, walking away from the life we'd built, the love we once had. And as I left her behind, I realized something. Sometimes, love isn't enough. Sometimes, the damage is too deep, the betrayal too sharp. And all that's left is to walk away, no matter how much it hurts. Because some things can't be fixed. Leaving her behind felt surreal, like a scene from a movie playing out in slow motion. I thought the pain would stop once I made the decision, that I'd feel some kind of closure. But the moment I walked away, the weight of it all hit me even harder. The numbness was gone, replaced by a sharp, gnawing ache that followed me everywhere. I couldn't shake it. The next few weeks were a blur. I went through the motions, work, eating, trying to sleep, but nothing felt real. I avoided friends, ignored calls from my family. What could I tell them? That my marriage fell apart in the most devastating way imaginable? That the woman I loved and trusted had been selling herself to strangers? I didn't want the pity, the awkward stares, or the endless questions. So I kept it all to myself, letting the isolation wrap around me like a heavy blanket. It was easier that way, or at least that's what I told myself. One night, after too many beers and too many sleepless hours, I found myself staring at old photos of us. Back when things were good, really good. Her smile, her laugh, the way she used to look at me like I was the only man in the world. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, a different version of us that didn't exist anymore. I started questioning everything. Myself, my choices, our relationship. How did we get here? How did I not see it coming? Was I blind? Or was I just so desperate to believe we were happy that I ignored the signs? I'd replay conversations in my head, trying to pick out the moments where things started to shift, where the cracks began to form. I thought about the late nights she'd come home, tired and distant. The times she'd pull away from me in bed, saying she was just stressed from work. Maybe I had seen it all along, but didn't want to admit it. Maybe I was too afraid of what it meant. Because deep down, I knew I wasn't perfect either. I'd gotten complacent, comfortable, thinking that love was enough to sustain us. I took her for granted, assuming she'd always be there, no matter what. But love is fragile. And I didn't realize just how fragile it was until it shattered point one night. After weeks of silence, my phone rang. It was her. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to answer. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear her voice again, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe some leftover piece of love, made me swipe to answer. "John?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. "What is it, Kate?" I asked, trying to sound as indifferent as I could, though my heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to check on you," she said, her words slow, like she was struggling to find the right thing to say. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about you. About us." "Us?" I scoffed. "There is no us anymore, Kate." "I know," she whispered, "but that doesn't mean I've stopped caring about you. I don't expect you to forgive me, John. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I miss you. I miss what we had." There it was. That raw, honest confession I had been avoiding. And for a moment, I felt the pull. The urge to fall back into something familiar, something safe, even if it was broken. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't let her back in. Not after everything. "I can't do this, Kate," I said, my voice low. "You made your choice, and now we have to live with it." "I know," she said again, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "I'm sorry, John. I really am." Before I could say anything else, she hung up, leaving me with the empty hum of the dial tone. And just like that, the door to our past closed a little more. Moving on wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. You think that once you've made the decision to leave, it'll get easier. That time will heal the wounds, and eventually, you'll forget. But it's not that simple. Every day was a struggle. Some days, I'd wake up feeling like I could breathe again, like I was finally free of the weight of it all. Other days, it felt like I was drowning, like I was suffocating under the memories and the what-ifs. I'd see her in little things, a song on the radio, a dish she used to cook, the smell of her perfume lingering in the closet. Those moments hit the hardest, catching me off guard when I least expected it. I tried dating again, even went on a couple of dates, but it felt forced, hollow. I couldn't connect with anyone, not in the way I used to with her. The shadow of what she'd done was always there, lurking in the background, poisoning any chance I had of starting fresh. Trust was a foreign concept now. I found myself second-guessing everyone, wondering if they had secrets, if they were hiding something from me. I hated that feeling. I hated what she turned me into, a man who couldn't trust, who couldn't love without fear. Months passed. Slowly, the rawness of the pain began to dull, but it never really went away. One afternoon, I was at the grocery store, mindlessly picking out some apples when I saw her. Kate. She was standing in the produce section, holding a bag of oranges, looking just as lost in thought as I was. For a second, I thought about turning around, walking out before she noticed me. But she looked up, and our eyes met. There was no avoiding it now. "John," she said, her voice soft, almost uncertain. "Hey," I replied, not knowing what else to say. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, the air thick with everything unsaid. She looked different, tired, thinner. I wondered if she had moved on, if she was happy, but I didn't dare ask. "How have you been?" she finally asked, her voice shaky. I'm getting by," I said, trying to sound casual. "You?" She nodded slowly. "Same." We exchanged a few more pleasantries, but it felt forced, like two people who used to know everything about each other but now didn't know how to talk. "I've been thinking about you," she said quietly, her eyes dropping to the floor. "About us. I know it's too late, but I just wanted to say, I'll always be sorry for what I did." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her it didn't matter anymore, that I was fine. But the truth was, I wasn't fine. Not completely. "I know, Kate," I said softly, "but sorry doesn't change what happened." She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but she didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. We both knew that no amount of apologies would fix what was broken. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not the kind that makes everything better, but the kind that lets you accept that some things are just over. That no matter how much you want to fix them, you can't. You just have to let go. That it took time, but slowly, life started to feel normal again. I found myself thinking about her less and less. The pain was still there, but it didn't define me anymore. I started focusing on myself, rebuilding the pieces of my life that had fallen apart. Therapy helped, though I had been hesitant at first. Talking to a stranger about my most personal wounds felt like admitting defeat, but it was the opposite. It was freeing. I learned to forgive, not her, but myself, for not seeing the signs, for letting things get so bad. I stopped blaming myself for her choices. In time, I realized that I didn't need to understand why she did what she did. I didn't need all the answers to move on. Sometimes, you just have to accept that people make decisions you'll never understand, and it's not your job to fix them. It's been over a year since I left Kate, and things are finally looking up. I'm not completely healed. I don't think you ever fully heal from something like that, but I'm better, stronger. I've started seeing someone new. It's early, and I'm taking it slow, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. She knows about my past, about what happened with Kate, and she's patient with me. She doesn't push, doesn't demand that I trust her right away. And that's exactly what I need. I'm learning to love again, to trust again. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, life goes on. And maybe, just maybe, there's something better waiting for me on the other side of all this pain. Maybe this is just the beginning of my second chance.